Hi, I'm Dan Wasyluk, and I'm here presenting with Justin Silver. Today we're here to talk to you about some of the work we've been doing in the Fantom blockchain space to help NFTs get to market more quickly. And Justin will tell you about some of the challenges that we've been exploring in that space.
Yeah, and so we started looking around at different NFT projects that were available on Fantom and other blockchains and really tried to identify what made high quality ones different, what sort of features they had and functionality they could support, and started looking to design tools that would enable artists to do that with their NFT projects. At the same time, we wanted to make sure that the code that we were producing, the tools that we were writing were going to be repeatable for artists. We wanted to be able to scale it up so that it's usable on a small project, also on a larger project, and to keep building on the tools that we produced over time so that they could keep evolving with the space since it is so nascent and things are changing all the time. And that's really what brought us to NFT Gen, which is the tools that we've put together.
So NFT Gen is, the name for a pipeline of tools that we've created that we feel are kind of the minimum set of tools needed for an NFT project to be taken to market successfully. And so what that set of tools is it's a marketing microsite, which really is a small website that allows for you to share your project with the world and tell them about the lore behind your project, the unique value proposition that your project brings to the table, what the total supply of the project is going to be, the cost of minting, all of those kind of details, as well as any sort of roadmap that your project may have beyond just minting the actual NFT to users. The next component in the pipeline is really the heart of the pipeline, which is the generative engine. This is what takes the assets provided by projects or content creators and generates unique compositions of the properties and traits that those image assets represent. There are a bunch of different sort of rules and rarity configurations that we're able to then specify within that generative process, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in this presentation. Smart contracts are, of course, a key component of the process. Those are the blockchain components through which the actual NFTs are recorded to a distributed ledger. A minting microsite is also part of the suite. This is really sort of an evolution of the marketing microsite. It's a standalone Web3 application that allows for users to actually mint the tokens that you're trying to bring to market into existence and then hold them in their local wallets. And then the last part of the pipeline is sort of an optional piece, but it's also a really valuable piece, especially for, gamified types of NFTs, and that's a metadata server that allows for projects to have more control and ownership over the metadata that powers their NFTs, and it allows for more extended data use cases around the NFTs. So, if you're looking to build a game or gamify your NFTs, you're going to need to have a more rich set of data to use with those NFTs in the context of things like games, etc. And the metadata server provides the foundation for that information.
Yeah, and the sort of core of the whole process is the generative art engine. It's the component, like Dan was mentioning, that takes the source assets and randomly combines them based on the rules that you've defined to produce the final assets. When we were developing this engine, we looked at the workflow that artists are used to, exporting layers from Photoshop and similar tools, and using that same folder structure and naming structure to be able to quickly generate a very large configuration file based around those assets, which can be used to then produce the generative set. Once we're able to quickly have that configuration in place, we can start diving in and adding rules and rarity calculations or specifications, things that are unique to the project and make a set different and more high quality than what you might get if you were just randomly generating things. It helps you specify the end result a little bit more and really realize the vision that the artist had in mind when they were producing the source assets.
Great example of that is House of Kiba. They're one of the clients that we've used NFT Gen with. They made specific use of the rule sets that the engine provides for. And what they had in mind was really they developed their characters in the context of a series of different color palettes. And so they wanted the body component selection to essentially drive the color palette selection for any subsequent body parts. So for example, if a blue body was selected, they wanted to ensure that for the arms and the back component and the head and the shoulders, that selections from the blue color palette were also made, so that when you get to the final output, you got a character that was all of one color palette rather than it being a sort of mishmash of random colors, so that it stayed true to really the artist's vision for the characters. And so what we did was we did just that. We created a series of different rules that mirrored the color palettes that they wanted to have enforced within their generative set. We then applied those to the assets that they provided us with, and that leads to results like you're seeing here. You know, a number of different assets that by themselves don't look like much are combined into a new unique asset that, you know, without me showing you kind of the components behind it, you would never have guessed that, you know, it was made up of a bunch of, you know, different individual layers.
Yeah, and obviously smart contracts are going to be a core component of any NFT project. And what we've found on the projects that we've worked on is that they're all unique. They all have specific functionality and requirements that they require, but they also do share a lot of common functionality. And so what we've put together is a set of smart contracts, both snippets of code and libraries of smart contracts to implement different functionality for a project so that you can sort of get some of the groundwork out of the way and start focusing on some of the more interesting components and utilities that will eventually be added. And by having this large library we're able to pull from, we can, you know, get from sort of nothing to the base functionality and start pushing it forward very quickly, just by having this library to pull from.
Yeah, and so, you know, we've got a generative engine that creates the items to be minted. We've got smart contracts that ledger those items to be minted to the blockchain and provide for different minting formats. And then, of course, we have the marketing and minting microsite, which kind of ties all of those together and connects the user's experience to those other components. It starts as the marketing microsite, which again tells users about the project that you're bringing to market, when it's going to mint, how much it's going to mint for, total supply, roadmap, all those kinds of things. And then when the minting date comes, the site actually transforms into, you know, keeping all the same thematic as it's always had, but now revealing controls that allow for the user to actually connect to the site to their local MetaMask wallet, and then use the site to mint a number of different NFTs from the project. Some projects decide that they want to only allow, you know, 5 NFTs to be minted per transaction. Others decide that they want to have 20 or no limit to the number of NFTs that can be minted per transaction. And so the minting microsite really allows us to configure the minting experience for the different minting visions that projects have. And so here we have 2 different examples of that. You know, Portal Heads, which is a very popular Fantom project, they allowed users to mint up to 20 portal heads at a time. And then we've got Gen X's by House of Kiba. That was more of an Ethereum project. They limited their users to minting no more than 5 items at a time. And again, it's just an example of different visions that projects had for the user experiences when it comes to the minting process. But under the hood, the same minting microsite is being used for both. And another piece of sort of the marketing toolkit that we have in the pipeline is our Twitter minting bot. You know, really what this does is it helps to open up the eyes of collectors that may not be aware of your collection by posting new mintings automatically to Twitter every time a new NFT within your collection is minted. A lot of NFT collectors will simply hang it on Twitter and follow certain hashtags. And so the Twitter minting bot will target those hashtags so that your newly minted items are visible within their feed, which then hopefully will drive them to check out your site and potentially mint some of your NFTs for themselves. And then finally, kind of the last piece of the NFT Gen pipeline is this custom metadata resolver. It's really similar to what NFT.storage and Pinata.cloud offer in terms of kind of being a IPFS pinning service. This sort of takes it a little bit further in that allows you to choose between IPFS or other centralized persistent layers to store your data within, and it provides you a home base for extended data sets or extended index data, which can be used for powering things like games that are backed by your NFT or DeFi experiences that are tied to your NFT. And so, the custom metadata resolver is really valuable for projects that are looking to take NFTs to the next level and offer users more than just a generative asset that they can hold in their wallet. The metadata resolver provides you the backbone for some really interesting and unique experiences beyond the minting experience. And then use cases. So, what does this stuff look like in the actual market itself? So House of Kiba used the NFT Gen pipeline to generate 10,000 of these robot characters that they call Gen X's. They raised 4.2 million USD in the minting process, and they have a really robust roadmap actually for these Gen X characters. They are planning to use them both in augmented reality and virtual reality experiences. And so I'm very interested to see what the next legs of this project look like. And then Justin will talk about some of the other projects we've worked on.
Yeah, and so Chunk is another project that we've worked on recently, and it, I believe they mentioned used all custom voxel assets. When we initially started working on it, we were focused on the smart contracts and implementing a bid to earn system, which sort of gamifies an auction and allows for people to earn Fantom if they're outbid on the auction. We worked with the artists to restructure some of the scheduling for the auctions and how they'd be run to maximize the impact from the marketing and from the auction sales. And then we've since found that to be very successful, and there was a lot of interest in the project. So now we're looking into using some of the generative properties of the engine to power some 3D assets that can be used alongside the project. And then another project we worked on recently is Portal Heads, which also used a lot of the advanced features of the engine. Although the final assets are flat 2D images, the actual source assets that went into them were fairly complex. The individual assets are composed of several different images to get all of the layering and blending correctly. There's shadowing components that go into it. The assets were very high resolution. So it was able to use the rules, use some of the rarity settings, use some of the advanced configuration for compositing images to produce the images that the artist was looking for. And then you'll see in the screen there that we also included a lot of the rarity information about each attribute so that we could display it on our site, which was then adopted by Fantom for some of the Discord bots that I'm sure you've seen. PaintSwap has also implemented it on their marketplace, and several other projects have adopted it as well. And then we've also been continuing to work with them to expand the information that's available in the metadata so that we can provide overall scores about the rarity for an item, how that ranks within the overall collection, all sorts of fun stuff for data nerds to dig into.
And then one more use case for the pipeline, and this one is not yet minting, but is on the way to opening up minting, is a project called Catbotica. You can find it at catbotica.io. This one's interesting because even though the initial minting is going to be the same kind of 2D pipeline that we've been, we've shown you some examples of already, they actually have some interesting plans to switch out the last mile of the pipeline with a 3D process, where a 3D process within Blender 3D would actually consume the metadata JSON output from the NFT Gen engine and then create little generated 3D models that would then be rendered so that the user gets a rendering of the model, but then they also get the model as an unlockable piece of content that comes with the NFT that they mint. And so, what's next for NFT Gen now that we've got, a really solid pipeline for going from nothing to in-market generative NFT complete with minting microsite and marketing tools and metadata server in, sometimes under a week. Really what we're looking to do is enhance the back end of the process, taking that last mile of the process that so far has largely been a 2D compositing process and really moving more into the 3D side of things, seeing how we can combine the engine with augmented reality and virtual reality experiences, using the engine to create generative audio and motion art. And so, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff we can do with the engine in respect to generative audio that actually sounds good. And then I also think there's some interesting stuff that we can do with the engine when it comes to generative motion graphics, both taking animated layers and compositing them together into a generated motion graphic, but then also truly generating the motion paths of the graphics that are being animated using the engine. And so those are all things that we fully plan on exploring over the coming weeks and months. And then also using the engine in the context of like a composited voxel pipeline, where we're taking, instead of having an artist create handmade voxel art for us, having them create just elements of that voxel art and then feeding that into the engine so that the engine can actually generate new voxel art characters. And so, that's some of the stuff that we've got planned for the engine over the next weeks and months. So thanks again for your time. That's a lot of what we've been doing in this space so far. If you have any questions, we would love to work with you or hear more about your project. You can find us on Discord, or you can reach out to us at sales@blockchainfoundry.com. And thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot. Bye.